Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss my conclusions that I've drawn from studying American history. You won't agree with all my conclusions, you might not agree with any of them, but you should at least know about the events, the people, the concepts that I'm discussing here. So now, we're talking about the causes of the American Revolution. We're finishing up. The next episode is going to be The War of Independence Begins, but let's get onto this final build up. King George III was led by new Prime Minister Lord North into dealings with the colonies in the early 1770s. Lord North, with the king's support, repealed the Townshend duties except the one on tea. On the very day that Parliament repealed the Townshend Acts, March 5th, 1770, a bad brawl took place in Boston between British soldiers and what John Adams called, quote, Negroes and mulattoes, Irish Teagues, and outlandish jacktars, unquote, who began pelting a British soldier with snowballs as he was standing sentry at the customs house. After the main guard of 20 men was called out with fixed bayonets, another half hour of being pelted with snowballs and stones, and after one had been hit with a club by the gathering mob, that soldier fired without orders. Others followed, and when the smoke had cleared, 3 men lay dead and 2 more mortally wounded. An uproar followed, and this event was called the Boston Massacre, with this being described as a wanton slaughter of peaceable citizens going about the business by a brutal and licentious soldiery. John Adams defended the hapless British soldiers in court and won the acquittal of all but 2. His reputation as a patriot was such that, in spite of his defense of the hated British soldiers, he was still voted into the Massachusetts legislature. The colonists were getting so radically inclined that even their friends in Parliament suggested they cool down. This advice had no effect on Samuel Adams, who squeezed the so called Boston Massacre for everything it was worth. However, it was not easy whipping up antagonism to Britain among all the colonists due to the fact that the Americans were experiencing more prosperity under King George III than ever before. Nevertheless, Paul Revere engraved a picture called The Bloody Massacre, showing soldiers in line of battle firing point blank at 20 respectable citizens. Samuel Adams' point was not merely that of being a revolutionary and rabble rouser. He was focused on what he perceived to be the British policy of slowly squeezing the Americans with more and more excessive custom duties, which allowed the Crown to put more and more Crown appointees on the public payroll. In other words, your taxes would go to support your jailers. But this would be lost on most Americans even today. He needed a galvanizing issue to emotionally grab the masses. Governor Hutchinson and Samuel Adams engaged in a newspaper debate on constitutional issues, which Adams not only won from an intellectual viewpoint, but drove Hutchinson into a corner where he had to admit that the policy of the British government was that Americans had no rights other than those that King and Parliament chose to recognize. Then a revenue cutter named the Gaspee, under the command of a Royal Navy lieutenant employed by the commissioners of the customs to stop smuggling, ran aground near Providence, Rhode Island, and a party of local patriots boarded it, captured the officer and crew, beat them up, and burned the cutter. This was in 1772. An attack on a naval vessel had always been a serious offense. England threatened to apprehend the culprits and have them tried in England. With the right to trial by jury of your peers precious to every Englishman, this also caused an uproar. This threat resulted in the committees of correspondence in 12 colonies to discuss the growing encroachment upon colonial rights by the mother country. So this created that these committees of correspondence came about. Virginia's Assembly, the House of Burgesses, appointed a committee consisting of Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, and Richard Henry Lee among the members. Parliament in May 1773 legalized a new arrangement with the help of the British East India Company. It removed the duty on tea going directly to England and allowed the company to be its own importer to the colonies, doing away with middlemen and putting the company on a footing to compete with smugglers and undersell them. When tea ships arrived in the ports in America in December 1773, the Sons of Liberty organization was ready. In Charleston, the tea was unloaded but locked in a warehouse. Ships were, quote, persuaded to turn back from Philadelphia and New York. Bostonians decided to put on a better show. When the governor refused an order to send the tea ship back to England, a mob of citizens disguised as Mohawk Indians and blacks rushed down to the waterfront and emptied 342 big chests of tea into the harbor. I should have said that differently. It was a mob of black and white citizens disguised as Mohawk Indians. Um, The Boston Tea Party had the desired effect of irritating the British government into rash reprisals. The King, Lord North, and the English population of Great Britain were incensed at actions that could be sometimes called high treason. So Parliament passed the coercive or intolerable acts. The King said to Lord North, quote, "The die is now cast. The colonies must either submit or triumph," unquote. Samuel Adams and the other radicals got what they wanted, a showdown with John Bull, the nickname for England. So next, the War for Independence begins, and we'll discuss that in the next episode. Thank you for watching.